Steve Jobs keynote addresses are just as captivating now as they were then. Today, I'm ranking my top 10 Steve Jobs keynote addresses. While an argument can be made that his 2005 Stanford commencement address is his greatest ever,
stay hungry, stay foolish.
This video will only feature keynote addresses during his time at Apple. Number 10, iPad introduction.
And we call it the iPad.
Leading up to this event, there was a lot of hype and speculation surrounding Apple's first tablet computer.
In order to really create a new category of devices, those devices are going to have to be far better at doing some key tasks.
Many people were expecting a touchscreen version of macOS and were left underwhelmed when they instead saw a larger version of the iPod Touch. And since developers hadn't yet designed many iPad-specific apps, they had to showcase iPhone apps running on the iPad.
We can run these apps with pixel-for-pixel accuracy black-boxed in the center of the screen. We can also automatically pixel double and run those apps full screen.
Many of the demos Steve showcased lacked a lot of wow moments too, because everyone had already seen these demos on the iPhone 3 years earlier.
See what's happening today?
One of the exceptions was the introduction of iBooks in the iBook store. This keynote still secures a spot in my top 10 thanks to the success the iPad went on to have in the masterful construction of the presentation. Even the choice to perform the demos while lounging in a chair was a brilliant touch.
It's so much more intimate than a laptop, and it's so much more capable than a smartphone with this gorgeous large display.
Number 9, iPhone 4 introduction.
We're going to take the biggest leap since the original iPhone.
This is the last iPhone Steve Jobs introduced, and he took great joy in showing off the new design and features.
Stop me if you've already seen this.
However, he also grew annoyed throughout the presentation due to issues with the Wi-Fi.
You know, you could help me out if you're on Wi-Fi, if you could just get off. I'm afraid I have a problem and I'm not going to be able to show you much here today.
He ended up skipping a demo and later on even paused the presentation to scold the audience.
Shut all your laptops, turn off all these Wi-Fi base stations. Come on, look around you. I've got time.
Despite some hiccups, this presentation is still very engaging. Some of the highlights include the new Retina display, the brand new antenna system, iOS 4,
We're going to go even further, we're going to give it some metal.
and of course, the introduction of FaceTime.
Hey, Johnny. This never freezes up, so you guys haven't turned off all your Wi-Fi.
Number 8, iPod introduction.
iMac, iBook, iPod.
The introduction of the iPod in October 2001 marked a historic moment for Apple and the whole music industry. With its sleek design, user-friendly interface, and 5GB hard drive capable of holding up to 1,000 songs, it revolutionized the way people experienced music on the go.
That's iPod. I happen to have one right here in my pocket, matter of fact. There it is, right there.
The true genius of the iPod was the seamless integration with iTunes.
But a thought occurred to us, the devices don't know anything about the iApps. There's never been a device that's been built that can take advantage of all this amazing intelligence built into these apps running on a Mac. What if there was?
This meant more complicated tasks, such as creating playlists, would be handled on the computer. The iPod only had to worry about simpler tasks, like navigating and finding the music you wanted.
I'll just go into Artist right here, pick an artist, and here's a list of all my artists.
The iPod's launch expanded Apple's market beyond computers and laid the foundation for their future dominance in portable devices.
1,000 songs in your pocket.
Number 7, iTunes Music Store.
We decided, since no one else was doing this, that we were going to do it. And we started about 1.5 years ago to create a music store.
At the time Steve Jobs took the stage in April 2003, the music industry was grappling with rampant piracy and declining sales due to the rise of digital music.
So, from a user's point of view, let's look at the upsides and the downsides to this. It's got a vast selection. Unlimited CD burning, unlimited MP3 players. You can put the music on an unlimited number of computers, and from a user's point of view, it's free.
But there was also a dark side.
Very unreliable downloads. Very unreliable quality. There are no previews. No album cover art, and worst of all, it's stealing. It's best not to mess with karma.
The iTunes Music Store addressed all these pros and cons, available in a user-friendly platform, and it only costs 99 cents per song. This remains a wonderful presentation, and the iTunes Music Store set the stage for the digital music revolution.
It's not stealing anymore, it's good karma.
Number 6, MacBook Air Introduction. This presentation is quintessential Steve Jobs showmanship.
Let me take it out here.
Steve highlights many of the engineering marvels that went into creating the world's thinnest notebook and how it compares to the rest of the industry.
Now, how did we fit a Mac in here? How did we do it? I'm still stunned.
Not only was the product extremely thin and light, it did so without sacrificing on display quality, keyboard size, or the processor. It also featured Apple's first multi-touch gesture trackpad.
Again, we've taken some of these things we learned in the iPhone and now we're putting them in our notebook computers.
Probably my favorite part of this keynote is when Steve Jobs reveals what's missing from the MacBook Air.
Now, no matter how hard you look, one thing you're not going to find in a MacBook Air is an optical drive.
Apple has a habit of moving on from technology much earlier than everyone else. Steve lays out the primary uses people use optical drives for, and then shares the better wireless alternatives, all of which have only gotten better with age, and shows just how forward-thinking the MacBook Air was.
And we don't think users are going to miss that.
Number 5, iCloud Introduction.
So, you like everything so far? Good. Well, I'll try not to blow it.
This is Steve Jobs' last product announcement, and one of his most significant. He begins by reminding the audience of Apple's now decade-old digital hub strategy. This original insight recognized the PC as the central hub for where all your digital music, photos, and videos would be stored and managed.
Basically, sync it to the Mac, and everything was going to work fine. And it did, for the better part of 10 years. But it's broken down in the last few years.
The single-purpose devices of the past had now evolved into smart devices, which could all do music, photos, videos, and more. And the only way to keep these devices in sync with each other was by constantly connecting them to iTunes on your computer.
And keeping these devices in sync is driving us crazy.
So, their new great insight was to demote the Mac to being just another device, and instead moving the digital hub up into the cloud. The rest of the presentation is spent highlighting all the ways iCloud will be integrated into apps. After being one of the pioneers behind the personal computer, Steve's last keynote was a major step towards his ultimate vision of a world dominated by post-PC devices.
It just all works. It just works.
Number 4, Mac OS X Introduction.
Because it's my pleasure today to announce Mac OS X.
Back in 1997, Apple acquired Next for two primary purposes. First, it brought Steve Jobs back to the company. And second, they obtained the advanced Next Step OS, a move driven by the shortcomings of their existing OS.
So these were the goals for Mac OS X. But to sum it up, it was make the next great personal computer operating system.
Mac OS X is the result of that acquisition. It introduced a stable Unix-based architecture, enhanced internet integration, and a brand new visually appealing user interface called Aqua.
One of the design goals was when you saw it, you wanted to lick it.
It's full of great demos and lots of wow moments.
Here's a window, and I'll do a save as right now. See that? All right. What happens though if the window's really small? I mean, we got to think these things through. You know, and I want to save that. Well, this is what happens. How would I ever see them though if they get this small, or if I even prefer them this small? Well, we have something we call magnification, which works kind of like this.
It's fascinating to see the origins of so many features that we take for granted today. Also, this presentation ends with a very notable one more thing.
But I'm pleased to announce today that I'm going to drop the interim title.
Number 3, iMac Introduction.
This is what they look like today. And I would like to take the privilege of showing you what they're going to look like from today on.
10 months after the leadership change at Apple, Steve Jobs proclaimed that the company was back on track. He then went on to share their new simplified product strategy.
They wanted consumer products and they wanted pro products. But they also wanted two different kinds of each one, desktop and portable.
They had already filled in the Pro desktop quadrant with the Power Macintosh G3. Steve then goes on to introduce their new Pro portable product, the PowerBook G3.
It eats Pentium notebooks for lunch too.
Their consumer portable would have to wait until next year, so the rest of the event was all about the consumer desktop product. The iMac was an all-in-one personal computer designed to make internet access simple and accessible to everyone. The iMac's design was one of the major highlights.
The back of this thing looks better than the front of the other guys, by the way. And then
it departed from the conventional floppy disk and serial ports of that era, and instead embraced a CD drive and USB ports. The iMac went on to become the fastest-selling computer in Apple's history, and marked a turning point for the company's image.
I think that Apple is back on track, and I hope that what we've shown you today shows you how we are going to springboard ahead into the future of Apple computing.
Number 2, Macworld Boston 97.
I came today to give you a status report on what's going on and to try to fill you in on some of the steps we're taking to get Apple healthy again.
At the 1997 Macworld Expo in Boston, Steve Jobs took the stage for the first time as interim CEO of Apple. The company was losing money and on the brink of bankruptcy. Steve didn't have any new products to present. Instead, he announced a new board of directors, which included himself.
And then we're going to add 4 new board members. The rest of the prior board has resigned.
He honed in on the areas where Apple was still relevant, namely creative professionals and education. He emphasized that Apple's core assets were the over 20 million active Mac users, the Apple brand, and the Mac OS. He then notably dropped a bombshell that Apple would be setting aside its long-standing rivalry with Microsoft and instead forming a meaningful partnership.
We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose. Okay?
Steve even invited Bill Gates to say a few words.
And I happen to have a special guest with me today via satellite downlink. And if we could get him up on the stage right now.
This perspective shift for the company and the partnership with Microsoft is what helped kickstart Apple's remarkable turnaround. Finally, Steve ended the presentation by teasing a brand new ad campaign they were in the final stages of developing.
And I think you still have to think differently to buy an Apple computer.
Before I reveal my number 1 pick, here are some honorable mentions. Power Mac G3.
It's called a door. We just open this thing here, and there it is.
iBook.
And maybe I'll go to Disney here. You know, I can come on over here. Let me show them the show these guys how it works.
iPod Nano.
You ever wonder what this pocket's for? I've always wondered that. Well, now we know, because this is the new iPod Nano.
Antenna Gate.
We're not perfect. We know that. You know that. And phones aren't perfect.
One last honorable mention that I want to call out specifically, and that's the original Macintosh. I think a case can be made for this keynote being at any position on this list, including number 1. This announcement was truly historic. Even the greatest Super Bowl ad of all time was basically just a commercial for this event. Despite it having plenty of vintage Steve Jobs showmanship, I personally find myself rarely revisiting this one. I think a combination of the Macintosh going on to be a commercial failure, which leads to Steve Jobs being ousted from the company, and the overall 80s production quality
In a flash, how we changed all our lives. We are Apple.
really sours this one for me. All right, number 1, iPhone introduction.
We're going to make some history together today.
The original iPhone introduction is Steve Jobs' magnum opus. It is both his greatest keynote presentation and the most successful product Apple has ever released. I rewatch this keynote at least once a year. It's not just Steve's charisma, it's the audience's reaction to what they're witnessing that makes it so fun to look back on.
Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device.
Steve does a masterful job explaining the current state of smartphones and why the iPhone will be a game changer.
What we want to do is make a leapfrog product that is way smarter than any mobile device has ever been and super easy to use. This is what iPhone is.
You can tell Steve Jobs really knows what he's showing off is going to be revolutionary. He even remains uncharacteristically in a good mood when his remote control fails.
Clicker is not working. All right. They're scrambling backstage right now. You know, when I was in high school, Steve Wozniak and I, mostly Steve, made this little device called a TV jammer. And it was this little oscillator that would put out frequencies that would screw up the TV. And Woz would have it in his pocket. And we'd go into like a dorm at Berkeley where he was going to school, and a bunch of folks would be watching like Star Trek. And he'd screw up the TV, and somebody'd go up to fix it, and just as they had their foot off the ground, he'd turn it back on. And if they put their foot back on the ground, he'd screw up the TV again. And within 5 minutes, he'd have somebody like this for the rest of the Star Trek episode. Okay, so maybe it's working now, maybe they're gonna have to click them for me.
After the introduction of the iPhone, and with the massive success of their iPod line, Steve also announced the new official name of the company.
The Mac is the only one that you really think of as a computer, right? And so we thought about this and we thought, you know, maybe our name should reflect this a little bit more than it does. So we're announcing today, we're dropping the computer from our name, and from this day forward, we're going to be known as Apple Incorporated to reflect the product mix that we have today.
So, there you have it. Do you agree with my list? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.